My entitled parents told my golden child sister that she could take my adoptive daughter because I am not her real mother anyway. Alright, let me just get straight into it. If you grew up in a family like mine, you'd probably understand that there's always that one sibling who can do no wrong. In my case, that sibling was my younger sister, Sarah. Honestly, it's like my parents had already made up their minds when she was born that she was going to be the golden child. Meanwhile, I was stuck being the responsible one, the one who had to pick up the pieces whenever she messed up. Sarah always got away with everything. I'm talking about sneaking out at night, blowing off school, hanging with people who were definitely bad news. And my parents? They had a million excuses for her. She's going through a phase, they'd say. She just needs to figure herself out. Meanwhile, if I so much as raised my voice, I'd get a lecture about respect and responsibility. It was exhausting. Things really started going downhill when Sarah was about 17. That's when she started getting really wild. She was going to these parties every weekend, sometimes with people way older than her. Honestly, I don't even think she knew half the people she was hanging out with. I'd see her sneaking back into the house at 3 a.m., barely able to stand, and my parents just turned a blind eye to it. She's young, they'd say. Let her enjoy her life. Well, that carefree life caught up to her. Not even a month after she turned 18, she got pregnant. And of course, it was by some random guy she met at one of those parties. She didn't even know his last name. It was one of those moments where I thought, okay, maybe now our parents will step in and make her face some responsibility. But nope, that's not how things went down. Sarah was freaking out when she found out she was pregnant. I mean, she wasn't ready for a kid. She could barely take care of herself, let alone a baby. The first thing she said was that she wanted to get rid of it. She was adamant. She didn't want to be a mom, and honestly, I can't blame her for that. But my parents? Well, they weren't having it. They're super religious and acted like having an abortion was the worst thing she could ever do. They pretty much forced her to keep the baby despite how much she protested. I remember overhearing Sarah once saying she'd just leave the baby on some random doorstep when it was born if that's what it took to get rid of it. It wasn't just teenage rebellion or anger. She really didn't want this kid, and she was willing to do whatever it took to avoid being tied down by a baby. Fast forward a few months, and Sarah gives birth to this tiny little baby girl, Emily. Now, most people think that when a mother sees her baby for the first time, something clicks, and they instantly fall in love. Well, that didn't happen with Sarah. She barely looked at Emily. In fact, she left the hospital the day after giving birth and didn't even take Emily home with her. My parents brought the baby home while Sarah went off to, I don't know, find herself or something. And that's when everything changed for me. I couldn't just sit by and watch this little baby, my niece, be treated like an unwanted burden. I wasn't exactly jumping at the idea of becoming a parent, but someone had to step up, and it sure as hell wasn't going to be Sarah. So I made the decision to adopt Emily. I didn't even think twice about it. I wasn't going to let her grow up in a house where no one cared about her. Sarah didn't even put up a fight. She was more than happy to sign over her parental rights and walk away from it all. To her, it was like a huge weight had been lifted. Meanwhile, I was thrown into this whole new world of motherhood that I wasn't even remotely prepared for. When I told my boyfriend at the time, Ryan, about my decision, he wasn't exactly thrilled. In fact, he was downright pissed. We'd been together for 3 years, and he made it clear from the beginning that he didn't want kids. So when I told him I was adopting Emily, he gave me this ultimatum, him or the baby. Yeah, he really said that. And honestly, I didn't even have to think about it. I chose Emily. Ryan packed his stuff and walked out the door, and just like that, I was a single mom to a newborn baby. I'd be lying if I said it was easy. It wasn't, at all. I was 21, trying to finish my last year of college, working part-time just to pay the bills, and now I had a baby who needed me 24/7. There were days I thought I was going to lose it. Emily would cry all night, and I'd have to be up at 7 a.m. for class. I was so exhausted that there were times I didn't even know what day it was. And then there was the money issue. Babysitters? They're expensive. I couldn't afford daycare, so I relied on friends or classmates to watch Emily when I had to go to school or work. And even then, it felt like I was barely scraping by. My parents were still busy trying to fix Sarah's mess, so they weren't much help. They'd babysit every now and then, but they were more concerned with Sarah's emotional well-being than actually supporting me. But you know what? Despite all the sleepless nights, the stress, and the feeling that my life had been flipped upside down, I didn't regret it. Not for a second. Emily became my whole world. The first time she smiled at me, all the exhaustion and frustration melted away. It's hard to explain, but in those moments, it didn't matter how tired or broke I was. Emily needed me, and I was going to be there for her. As for Sarah, she didn't show any interest in Emily's life for years. She moved on, did her own thing, and barely even asked about her daughter. And honestly, that was fine by me. The less drama, the better. At that point, I thought things were finally settling down. I was figuring out how to balance school, work, and being a mom, and Emily was thriving. But of course, life has a way of throwing things at you when you least expect it. And it wasn't long before Sarah decided she wanted to waltz back into Emily's life, stirring up all kinds of trouble. But I'll get to that later. For now, all you need to know is that becoming Emily's mom changed everything for me. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I wasn't going to let my niece grow up feeling unwanted, even if it meant sacrificing everything I thought my life would be like. Alright, so after Ryan walked out and I adopted Emily, life got real. Fast. You know, people always talk about how hard it is to be a single mom, but until you're actually in it, there's just no way to understand how intense it really is. I thought I had a general idea of what I was signing up for, but I quickly found out I was completely wrong. Let's start with the basics. I was 21, still in college, and suddenly responsible for this tiny human who needed me for everything. It was like being thrown into the deep end of a pool without knowing how to swim. I barely had time to process the fact that I was now a single mom because every second was about keeping Emily fed, changed, and hopefully sleeping. And let me tell you, that kid did not like to sleep. Everyone told me, "Oh, newborns sleep a lot, you'll get some rest." Yeah, okay. Maybe other people's babies do, but Emily? Nope. She was the lightest sleeper in the world. The second I thought I could close my eyes for 5 minutes, she'd wake up crying. I swear, I got so used to functioning on 2 or 3 hours of sleep that it felt like a luxury. On top of that, there was school. I was in my last year of college, and dropping out wasn't an option. I had to finish, for both of us. But juggling full-time classes, homework, and taking care of Emily, that was a different beast. There were days I'd rush from a lecture to daycare to pick her up, then head to my part-time job, and by the time I got home, I was so exhausted I didn't even have the energy to cook. It felt like my whole life was just this constant cycle of feeding Emily, running to class, picking her up, working, and then doing it all over again. Honestly, it was like I was in survival mode. No time to think, just doing what I had to do to keep everything moving. The worst part wasn't even the lack of sleep or time. It was the isolation. My friends were off doing what normal 21-year-olds do, going out, planning for their careers, and talking about vacations or concerts. Meanwhile, I was up at 3 a.m. with a crying baby and a pile of laundry I hadn't touched in days. I tried to keep up with my friends at first, but the invites started to slow down. I mean, I don't blame them. It's hard to relate to someone whose life revolves around diapers and teething when yours is about internships and bar crawls. I think the moment that hit the hardest was one night when I got a group text from my college friends, all talking about this big trip they were planning for after graduation. A week in Cancun, sun, drinks, fun, everything I used to look forward to. And here I was, sitting in the bathroom with Emily in my arms, trying to get her to calm down after she woke up screaming. The reality of it all just kind of punched me in the face at that moment. That wasn't my life anymore, but as tough as it was, I was also starting to get the hang of it. There were small victories, like the first time I managed to get Emily to sleep through the night. Well, okay, maybe not the whole night, but 5 straight hours felt like a miracle. Or the first time I got an A on an assignment I'd crammed for while Emily napped in the stroller next to me. It wasn't all bad. The connection I had with Emily was something I never expected. Like, the first time she smiled at me, genuinely smiled, it was like the world stopped for a second. All the sleepless nights, the stress, the doubts, they didn't disappear, but they felt a little less heavy. In those moments, it was all worth it. There was one day that stands out. I had a huge exam, and I was stressed to the max. Emily was teething, so she was extra fussy. I had been up all night with her, trying everything I could to soothe her, and by morning, I felt like a zombie. I ended up taking her to daycare half an hour late, and by the time I got to my class, I was a wreck. I sat there staring at the exam paper, and all I could think about was how I was failing at everything. School, motherhood, life in general. I didn't even care about the exam at that point. After class, I picked up Emily and headed home, fully prepared for another night of chaos. But something changed. When we got home, she was calmer. She wasn't crying, she wasn't fussy. She just looked at me with those big eyes and reached out for me. I held her close, and in that moment, I realized that even though I felt like I was drowning, Emily didn't see me as a failure. To her, I was her world. I was doing something right, even if it didn't always feel that way. That realization was like a switch flipping. I started letting go of the idea that I had to be perfect. I was never going to have it all figured out, and that was okay. I just had to keep going, keep pushing for her. But as much as I was finding my rhythm with Emily, things with my family were still strained. My parents? They were more concerned with Sarah's healing process than helping me out. Every time I asked them for help, like, could you watch Emily for an hour so I can study? They'd come back with some excuse about how Sarah needed their attention or how they were too busy. The golden child syndrome was still alive and well. Sarah, who was living her carefree life without a single responsibility, somehow still managed to be the center of their world. It's like they'd forgotten about the fact that I was the one who stepped up for Emily when Sarah couldn't be bothered. It was infuriating, but at this point, I'd come to expect it. Rachel, my best friend, was the only one who really had my back during all of this. She'd drop by with groceries when she knew I didn't have time to shop, or come over just to keep me company while I studied and Emily slept. I honestly don't know how I would have made it through without her. Alright, so things were finally starting to feel like they were under control. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy by any means, but I had my routine with Emily, school was getting wrapped up, and I was finally getting the hang of this whole single mom life. But just when I thought I had it all under control, that's when Sarah decided she wanted back in. I hadn't heard from her in years. Not a single call, text, nothing. And then, out of nowhere, she shows up at my parents' house for dinner one night, acting like the last 5 years didn't even happen. It was like she was coming back from a long vacation, ready to slide right into the role she abandoned. My mom was so excited to have her back, but I had a feeling in my gut that this wasn't just a casual visit. Something was coming. So a few days later, Sarah calls me up, and I'm not even going to lie, I didn't want to answer. But I did, and the conversation was so weird. She was all like, I've been thinking a lot about Emily lately. I really want to get to know her. I didn't even know how to respond at first because the nerve of her to act like she hadn't disappeared for 5 years was blowing my mind. I asked her, why now? What's changed? She didn't have a good answer, of course. Just the typical, I've changed, I've grown up, nonsense. And while part of me wanted to believe her, I wasn't stupid. I didn't trust her, but at the same time, I didn't want to be the bad guy. I didn't want to be the person who kept Emily away from her biological mother, no matter how much I knew she didn't deserve to be called that. So I agreed to let Sarah come over, not for Emily's sake, but because I wanted to see how serious she was about changing. If she really wanted to be a part of Emily's life, she'd have to earn it. But honestly, I wasn't holding my breath. When she came over for the first time, it was awkward. I mean, how do you reintroduce a woman to her biological daughter when the daughter doesn't even know she exists? I had told Emily before that Sarah was her birth mother, but I'd kept things simple because, let's face it, she was too young to understand all the complexities of that situation. To her, Sarah was just some random woman she'd never met. The first visit went about as well as you'd expect. Sarah tried to be all friendly, talking to Emily like they were old friends, but Emily wasn't having it. She was shy and stuck by my side the whole time. I mean, can you blame her? Sarah was practically a stranger, and kids are smart. They can sense when something's off. But here's where things started to get weird. After the first visit, Sarah kept coming back, and at first I didn't mind. I thought maybe it would be good for Emily to at least know her biological mom, even if Sarah had bailed on us before. But Sarah wasn't just coming by for short visits. She was hanging around longer and longer each time. It was like she was trying to ease herself back into a role she had no right to. She started bringing Emily gifts, new toys, clothes, even expensive stuff like tablets and gadgets. I mean, I appreciate a gift as much as anyone, but it felt off, like she was trying to buy her way into Emily's life. Emily didn't even need that stuff. She was happy with her dolls and crayons. But Sarah just kept piling on the gifts, almost as if she was trying to impress someone. It wasn't about Emily at all. It was about her ego. Then, one day, Sarah drops the big question. Do you think Emily could spend a weekend with me? I froze. I didn't know what to say. I mean, this is the same person who didn't even want Emily when she was born, and now she's asking to play weekend mom? I told her I'd think about it, but inside I was screaming no. There was no way I was letting Sarah take Emily, especially when she hadn't proven anything to me. I needed advice, so I called up Rachel. She knew the whole situation and was pretty much the only person who saw through Sarah's act. When I told her about the weekend request, she was furious on my behalf. She doesn't get to just waltz back in and act like she's some kind of hero, Rachel said. And she was right. Sarah hadn't done any of the hard work. She didn't stay up all night when Emily was sick or struggling to pay for daycare. She didn't raise Emily. I did. But my parents? Yeah, they were thrilled at the idea of Emily spending the weekend with Sarah. It'll be so good for them to bond, my mom said, like that was the answer to everything. I swear it's like they just forgot the last 5 years ever happened. They didn't see the damage Sarah had done by leaving. All they saw was their golden child coming back, and they were ready to forgive and forget in an instant. The problem was, I wasn't ready to forget. And I sure as hell wasn't going to just hand Emily over to Sarah like she was owed something. I had to put my foot down, and I knew that wasn't going to go over well. When Sarah came over the next time, she brought up the weekend thing again. I looked her right in the eye and told her, "I'm not comfortable with that. You've only just started coming around, and Emily doesn't even know you yet. Let's take this slow." She didn't take it well, at all. She got all defensive, saying things like, "I'm her real mom. I have a right to spend time with her." That hit a nerve, and I snapped back. "You gave up that right the day you walked away." The look on her face? Pure shock, like she couldn't believe I was standing up to her. She stormed out of the house, and I thought, well, that's the end of that. But no, it wasn't. Not even a week later, I started hearing from my parents about how upset Sarah was, how she just wanted to make things right, and how I was being too harsh. I couldn't believe it. My parents, who had barely lifted a finger to help me with Emily, were now coming to Sarah's defense. It was like I was the bad guy in my own story. They were acting like Sarah was the victim here, and it drove me insane. It was clear now that this wasn't going to be a simple, let's reconnect situation. Sarah wasn't just back for a visit, she wanted something more, and I wasn't about to let her take what was mine. But the worst part? This was just the beginning. So, after Sarah's little meltdown at my house, I thought maybe she'd back off for a while. Maybe she'd realize that I wasn't just going to hand Emily over to her and that she'd have to earn her place in her life. But nope, that wasn't what happened. In fact, it seemed like things got worse after that. And this time, it wasn't just Sarah I had to deal with. It was my whole family. It started with my mom. Of course it did. She's always had a soft spot for Sarah, and even after everything that happened, she still saw her as this innocent little girl who just made a few mistakes. A few mistakes? Sarah basically abandoned her child for 5 years, but somehow that never seemed to register with my mom. She called me a few days after the blow-up with Sarah and went on and on about how Sarah's really hurting right now. I had to stop myself from laughing. I mean, Sarah was hurting? What about me? I was the one who had been raising Emily all this time. I was the one who sacrificed everything to make sure Emily had a good life. But of course, none of that seemed to matter. Mom kept pushing, telling me how I should give Sarah another chance, and how family is the most important thing. I'd heard that line a million times before, and every time it was just an excuse for Sarah's behavior. Family is important, sure, but that doesn't mean you get to walk all over people and expect them to forgive you just because you share the same last name. But the worst part? It wasn't just my mom. Soon enough, I started hearing from other family members too. My aunt called, and the conversation went pretty much the same way. "Sarah just wants to make things right," she said. "You should let her be a part of Emily's life." And then my cousin chimed in with the same nonsense, telling me how Sarah had changed and how it would be good for Emily to know her biological mom. It felt like a full-blown intervention. Suddenly, people I hadn't spoken to in years were coming out of the woodwork to give me their opinions on my life. And of course, none of them actually knew the full story. They didn't know what it was like to be up all night with a newborn, or to miss out on everything in your 20s because you had to prioritize someone else's life over your own. They didn't know how hard it was to juggle school, work, and raising a baby all on your own. But sure, they had plenty to say about what I should do. At first, I tried to be patient. I tried to explain to them that this wasn't just about giving Sarah another chance. This was about protecting Emily. I wasn't going to let Sarah swoop in now that Emily was older and act like she was the hero. She wasn't the one who had done the hard work. I was. But none of that seemed to get through to anyone. The more they pushed, the more frustrated I got. It wasn't even about Sarah anymore. It was about the fact that my family couldn't see the truth. They were so blinded by this idea of family unity and forgiveness that they didn't care about what was right for Emily. All they cared about was making Sarah feel better. Then came the ultimatum from my parents. I was sitting at home trying to enjoy a quiet night with Emily when my dad called. Now, my dad usually stayed out of the drama between me and my mom, so I wasn't expecting what happened next. "We need to talk," he said. His tone was serious, and right away, I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. He started off by telling me how my mom was really upset about the whole situation with Sarah. No surprise there. But then he hit me with this. "We've been thinking, and maybe it's time for you to consider letting Sarah have joint custody of Emily." I just sat there stunned. Joint custody? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father was suggesting that I share custody of my daughter with the woman who abandoned her for 5 years. "Dad, you can't be serious," I said. "Sarah hasn't been there for Emily. I've raised her. She's my daughter." I know, he replied, like he was trying to calm me down. But she's still Emily's mother biologically, and she's trying to make things right now. It was like I was talking to a brick wall. No matter how much I explained that Sarah had given up her rights as a mother, they just didn't get it. In their minds, Sarah was still Emily's mom, and I was the one standing in the way of a reunion. The whole conversation left me feeling drained. It was like no matter what I did, I couldn't win. My parents were always going to side with Sarah, and it didn't matter how much I had done for Emily or how hard I had worked. To them, Sarah would always come first. After that call, I started to pull back from my family. I just couldn't handle the constant pressure anymore. Every time I talked to them, it felt like they were trying to guilt trip me into giving Sarah what she wanted. And I wasn't about to let them make me feel like I was the bad guy for protecting my daughter. Rachel, thank God, was my rock during all of this. She kept reminding me that I wasn't crazy, that I was doing the right thing by standing my ground. "You're Emily's mom, not Sarah," she'd say. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But as much as I tried to stay strong, the stress was getting to me. I started having nightmares about losing Emily, about Sarah coming in and taking her away. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, and it would take me a few minutes to calm down and remind myself that it wasn't real. But the fear was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. And the more my family pushed, the more I started to wonder if they were right. Was I being too harsh? Should I let Sarah have more of a role in Emily's life? I knew deep down that I wasn't wrong, but when your own family turns against you, it's hard not to question yourself. Every day felt like a battle, and I was getting tired of fighting. And then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. My mom showed up at my house unannounced, with Sarah in tow. I wasn't prepared for it, and honestly, I think that was the point. They wanted to catch me off guard, to get me to agree to something I wasn't ready for. My mom started off with her usual lines about family and forgiveness, but I could tell there was something more going on. Then she hit me with it. "We've talked to a lawyer, and Sarah's thinking about taking legal action to get custody of Emily." I felt like the ground dropped out from under me. Legal action? My own sister was going to try and take my daughter away from me? That's when I realized this wasn't just family drama anymore. This was about to become a full-blown fight, and I wasn't going to back down. So, after my mom dropped the whole "Sarah's thinking about legal action" bomb on me, things got real. Like, really real. I wasn't just dealing with family drama anymore. This was turning into an actual fight for Emily, and the thought of losing her scared the hell out of me. The first thing I did was call Greg, the lawyer I'd been working with. I wasn't about to take any chances. I needed to know exactly where I stood legally because I had no idea what kind of lies Sarah might try to throw at the court. Greg was calm, like always, which helped me feel a little less panicked. He reassured me that I had a strong case. Emily had been in my care since birth. I had legal custody, and Sarah had abandoned her for 5 years. Still, there was that nagging fear in the back of my mind. Courts can be unpredictable, and when it comes to family law, things can get messy fast. I knew I needed to prepare for the worst, so Greg and I went over everything. Every document, every piece of evidence. I had photos, medical records, school reports, anything that proved I was the one who raised Emily. Sarah had nothing. She might have been Emily's biological mother, but that was the extent of her involvement. And I wasn't about to let her waltz into court and act like she'd been some kind of victim. But even though I was getting everything lined up, the emotional toll was killing me. Every night I'd lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, just imagining what it would be like if Sarah somehow won. What if she convinced the judge that I was keeping Emily from her? What if the court actually gave her joint custody? I mean, this was my daughter, the little girl I'd raised from day one. The idea of losing her, even for a weekend, was unbearable. On top of that, my family wasn't letting up. My mom kept calling, trying to talk some sense into me. She actually said I should just agree to joint custody before things got ugly. Ugly? They were already ugly. And now she was acting like I was the one who was making it worse. My dad? He wasn't much help either. He'd just say things like, "Maybe this is what's best for everyone." Everyone except me and Emily, apparently. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, Sarah had the nerve to start showing up at Emily's school. The first time, she was just standing outside at pickup, watching from across the street. I don't know if she was trying to intimidate me or what, but it freaked me out. I didn't say anything to Emily about it because, honestly, she didn't even recognize Sarah. That's how much of a stranger Sarah was to her. But I knew this was Sarah's way of trying to get under my skin. I had to get the school involved. I told them not to let Sarah anywhere near Emily unless I was there, and thankfully, they were really understanding. But it felt like I was being watched all the time, like Sarah was just waiting for me to slip up. The court date finally came, and I was a nervous wreck. I walked into that courtroom and there she was, Sarah, with my parents sitting right behind her. I can't even explain how betrayed I felt seeing them there. They were supposed to be my parents. They were supposed to support me. But no, they were sitting there, backing Sarah up like she hadn't completely bailed on her daughter's life. The hearing itself was tense. Greg laid everything out, how I'd adopted Emily, how Sarah had abandoned her, how I'd been the one to provide for her in every way. He was calm, collected, and professional, while Sarah's lawyer tried to spin some story about how Sarah had turned her life around and how she just wanted to reconnect with her child. It was the same sob story she'd been feeding my family for months, but this time, it didn't fly. Then Sarah got up to testify. And man, was that something. She talked about how she was young and scared when she had Emily, and how she regretted not being there for her. She even started crying on the stand, trying to play the sympathy card. But I wasn't buying it, and neither was the judge. There was no way Sarah could explain away 5 years of complete absence, no matter how many tears she shed. When it was my turn to speak, I was shaking. Not because I was scared of Sarah, but because the weight of everything hit me all at once. I wasn't just defending my right to be Emily's mom, I was defending our entire life together. I told the court everything, how I'd been there for every milestone, every scraped knee, every late-night nightmare, how I'd done it all without any help from Sarah or my parents, and most importantly, how much Emily meant to me. By the end of it, I could barely hold it together, but I knew I had to stay strong, for Emily's sake. The judge took a while to deliberate, which felt like an eternity. I kept glancing over at Sarah, who looked nervous for the first time. My parents wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I think deep down, they knew Sarah didn't stand a chance. Finally, the judge made the ruling. Sarah's petition for joint custody was denied. Emily was staying with me, where she belonged. I can't even describe the wave of relief that hit me when those words came out of the judge's mouth. It was like I could finally breathe again. But even though I won the case, things weren't perfect. My relationship with my parents? It was shattered. I didn't even speak to them after the hearing. I just grabbed Emily and walked out of there. I didn't have anything to say to them anymore. If they wanted to side with Sarah, that was their choice. But I wasn't going to let them back into my life after what they did. As for Sarah, I haven't heard from her since the court ruling. I'm not naive enough to think she's gone for good, but for now, she's out of the picture. And that's all I care about. These days, things are starting to feel normal again. Emily and I are back in our routine, and we're happy. It's just the two of us, like it's always been, and I'm okay with that. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who are there for you, who support you no matter what. And if that means cutting off the toxic people, so be it. At the end of the day, I know I made the right choice. Emily is safe, and she's with the person who loves her more than anything in the world. That's all that matters.